This conference will now be
Town
recorded.
of Ocean Ridge Planning and Zoning meeting, November 19, 2024. Roll call, please.
Member Siggety,
Here.
Member Corrala,
Here.
Member DeBaptiste,
Here.
Vice Chair Khalil,
Here.
and Chair Ferber.
Here. Roll.
Full house.
Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We used to say amen.
Yes.
Where that comes used to have amen, yes. Yeah.
Public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Adoption of the minutes of October 15, 2024.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion action items. First item is the approval of the meeting dates. Has everyone looked that over? Does anyone have any conflicts, questions?
Not yet.
That's a long way away. That's a long way away, Kelly. We don't know what we're going to be doing back then. We'll file this away and see what happens, but yes.
2025.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? I mean, the meeting dates, please. Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Thank you very much. Next item, review of the updates to chapter 66 and 67 regarding the flood damage prevention and the technical codes and other construction standards.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Christy Gatto. Is this working? It's on. Yeah, okay. Christy Gatto on behalf of the Town of Ocean Ridge. This, as you may recall, we brought back last meeting. These are changes that have been proposed by the town's outside consultants on some floodplain management revisions that need to be made to be in accordance with FEMA rules and for our CRS rating. The issue that came up at the last meeting was the definition of substantial improvement, which, as you know, controls both under the floodplain management and the Florida Building Code when a property owner needs to completely renovate their home and make it consistent with existing codes. So this is important for floodplain management because obviously with the new elevation maps, it could be a potential hardship for some property owners. Under the current code definition of substantial improvement, under the local amendments to the Florida Building Code, the town currently has a 5-year look back. So it's a cumulative look back in terms of looking at what has been done in the past 5 years, looking at the market value of the property and determining whether they've hit that 50% threshold or not. So board member Khalil had provided some research that he had done looking at substantial improvement. I reviewed that, and so what I proposed was to reduce that 5-year look back to a 2-year look back to shorten that time frame, recognizing the hardship that may be created for folks who are certainly in the hazardous flood areas that now they would have to elevate their entire home if they hit that 50% threshold. In talking with board member Khalil, he suggested maybe we go to a 1-year look back to be a little bit more equitable. I can tell you that this issue just came up in the Village of Palm Springs, which, although quite different than Ocean Ridge, they completely eliminated their cumulative look back. And now, at least in the Village of Palm Springs, you could come in and do a project that is 45% of your market value, do that project, and then 6 months come back and do another 45%, and you still won't hit that 50% threshold. Obviously, the village is much different. They're not facing some of the issues Ocean Ridge is in terms of flooding for the most part. So I think, the discussion today is what should that look back be if the board wants to consider having a look back. Is 2 years, is 1 year? Do you want to stick with the 5-year? That's really the issue for today's discussion because most of the changes are consistent with what was provided at last month's meeting. And I believe the town's engineer may have some further comments because the other thing that I updated was we had a provision in Chapter 67 where we were relying on the best available data for the FEMA maps before they were officially adopted because there was an appeal going on between Palm Beach County and FEMA. So I tweaked that information and that provision, and in doing that, I think that brought up some inconsistencies we may have with our current code and some of the flood elevation issues. So there may be further revisions to Chapter 67 just to make sure everything's consistent.
Understand. And you've tweaked some of the definitions as well here that will relate to that, right? Like market value, right? I noticed.
Yeah, the market value tweak was done by the consultants in the previous version.
Okay.
So
okay.
really the only tweak that I made to substantial improvement was to reduce the 5-year look back to a 2-year look back.
I'm just kind of taking a step back, just to understand, because what you're using these terms, market value, which is now an appraisal, right? Basically, right? And then I assume is the, and didn't see that definition, but is the new construction a bid or is that, what are we using? We're using appraisal for market value. What are we using for improvements? Is that when they come through and they get a bid and a number and apply for a permit and that dollar amount is calculated at that time?
My understanding is that's what they generally look at is what the bid, the estimate that is provided with their building permit, they look at. But I think they, sometimes they question that depending on how it's submitted and what it's submitted with. So that's when they might push back and ask for an appraisal.
Okay.
And
Yes, normally we look at, the contracted amount that comes in. It's basically a scope of work. At the window, we'll take it in if, it's looking and everything looks good and that's what we do. But the building official can always question it based on the scope of work if he doesn't feel it's in line. And he may ask them to do a revised one.
Great, thank you. Comment, Commissioner? Members?
So they're not looking back and looking at because every project I've ever done ends up with change orders and change of scope.
Yes.
So when we're looking at that original look, the original filing for the valuation of the 50%.
When we take them in originally, we look at them and then we look 5 years back in total. When they first come in, of course, we're not going to know if there's going to be any change orders, so we have to go with what's at face value.
Okay. So you don't figure out what the actual amount was at the end of the day. You just get what was provided to you at the beginning. I think that's Neil's question, right?
If there's change orders, we keep track of that in the system. So in total,
You'll know if it's
We'll
went
know.
from $100 to $200 at the end of the project, you'll know it was $200?
correct.
Okay, so just so we get all the facts straight.
That seems to me kind of challenging for the property owner that may not know that they're going to have those change orders coming up. And then all of a sudden they're left with a design that doesn't work. And now they have to spend significantly more money basically to raise the existing structure and start over. That doesn't seem reasonable.
After the horse is out of the barn.
After the horse is out of the barn, I guess is a good way. Yeah.
Well, I think from what I've heard from what the building official does is if someone comes in with a project where they're close to that 50%, they advise the property owner and the contractor that you're close to your 50%. So when they come in and, with a change order, if you're really changing something, you got to come in from different permits. So that's when you're going to be advised, hey, listen, you're now over that threshold. So these aren't just like little changes that, they found of constructability issues. These are like major changes. And I think that's what they've seen is that typically happens.
Yeah, we had that here actually not long ago. Someone came in and we told them that they were very close to going over that. And the building official told them that if they had any other changes, it probably would then qualify for the 50%. So they were very well aware of it. And then if they did, they would have to then stop and go through the process of doing the elevations.
So getting back to Ken, you're the one that suggested that they go from 5 to 2?
1.
No,
Or
I
one,
suggest to go down to 1.
And the reason for that was?
Exactly what you pointed out.
I think there's an issue with respect to putting that onus on, we have a lot of turnover relatively in this town, other than me, and Betty. And I guess 36 years. But regardless of that, personally, I think a year is reasonable. However,
Can you turn your
saying
microphone
that, I'm sorry. Saying that, I'm probably not opposed to going to 2 years if, and I have a question, and I didn't bring my material, the research that I did, and I don't remember, is the substantial improvement definition. I can't remember whether that exception is hard. We can't change it, and that is how we define, let me be specific. The term does not, however, include any project for improvement of a building required to correct existing health, sanitary, safety code violations identified by the building official. That's an exception. So if they can correct those violations, but I believe under this definition, they have to actually be existing. There had to be a violation notice. There had to be some other thing. And so what I was wondering if we could expand that definition by saying not only violations or standards or building standards. So it would modify it to be health, sanitary, safety code violations or building standards identified by the building official. That would expand it a little bit and take in that extra. And if that's the case, I would go with 2 years. I would be okay with 2 years, because then we're dealing with that inequitable situation where somebody comes in and said, surprise, and we're really handling what is the intent of this is if somebody comes in and wants to add a structure, or, bring it down to the 4 walls, and it doesn't, that's really what the intent of this originally was, not where somebody comes in and puts in a $200,000 kitchen in a $100,000 home, which has happened. So that's what we're trying to, in my view, that's what we're trying to avoid, is that type of situation. I don't have a problem somebody wants to spend $200,000 on a kitchen in their $100,000 home if that's what they want. And why should we make them tear down the house because they want to improve the existing structure when there's no other change to the house? I have an issue with that. So, or somebody puts on a roof. Now roofs are, anywhere from $45,000 to $100,000 now. I'll give you an example. I even though I have hurricane windows, I did those hurricane windows, probably close to 20 years ago. So I had my window guy, my glass company that I come over, and they want $100,000 to redo all of them. Well, wait a minute, where'd that come from? So all of a sudden the costs of things are getting more expensive, and it's fine in my house, but at some of these houses that want to improve for windows and storm hardening, which she did put the exception in, which we discussed, which is good. But unless it's a violation, it doesn't meet the standard. So we have to, or meet the definition. So I think if we can get by including that, Christie, a violation or a building standard, then that I'd be happy with that.
That's an exception.
I think I'm long-winded. I apologize, but I hope I made my point.
That building standard does not include the elevation, right? Because then that means you can redo the entire house.
No, it would be that. Well, the elevation wouldn't be necessarily. Well, I guess it could technically be a violation, couldn't it? I guess there's one way you can look at that.
It's a hard issue because the alternative look of it is, we're all seeing flooding everywhere we live, and what you're essentially doing is grandfathering in these homes that are at a lower elevation. So if it's, even though it can be a hardship, if you have an older home, a smaller home, ideally, if these homes don't get raised up, then the town can't raise the roads. So trying to get everybody to, we've got to improve this and we've all got to raise up, is sort of one of the counter arguments to having something where you don't have a cumulative look back, because then everybody's going to have these homes that are lower elevation. And it creates other problems like, the seawall discussion we had. Those are.
Having,
yes.
Yeah, but that's a different issue, and I think we're gonna have to address that issue separately. But I hear what you're saying, but let's look at the realities of our community as it relates to our community. The homes are getting, because the values of the land are greater, people are coming and saying, well, listen, I'm going to put a new house in. How many homes have we had that have been renovated, so to speak? There haven't been all that many. And I think it's okay. I hear you. But at the same time, those homes that are on that fringe may not get renovated. So they may not get torn down, and they may not get renovated. So now we're caught in this crosshairs. So we're still back at the same situation where we're not solving the problem.
let's get back to what the original question though is this is to do what? To improve the seawall or the structure of the seawall? Is that what we're talking about here, really?
No, this has nothing to do with the seawall.
No, well, it does, really, doesn't it? I mean, it does on the bigger scope of what we're talking about, right?
Well, it's really.
About the flood.
It's the floodplain management
Yes.
is what's forcing these changes. And so for some cities, they're trying to be more equitable because it's a hardship for the smaller houses that aren't being fully replaced. But that's what's pushing this issue. So it's looking at your substantial improvement threshold, and whether, do you want, as a policy decision for the town, some type of measure where you do a look back in time to make sure that people aren't just doing little projects to completely improve their house, whereas maybe the policy should be, we should be working towards everybody moving their houses up to a higher elevation.
Yeah.
So that's really what's pushing it. The seawalls are sort of, an indirect consequence of this issue in some respects, but that's really what the policy question is. What does the policy want to be? Let's allow people to just renovate as much as they want without forcing them to elevate at some point, or do we have a threshold where we look back and say, no, now you've got to elevate just like your neighbors?
Well, at the same time, the way they're viewing the values of the homes is having an impact on how this comes into play. You can have a perfectly good home that doesn't need necessarily the elevation and gets caught in the trap. And we have examples of that. That there's a home on the south of this perfectly fine. That's not an issue. And because the depreciated value of the home, the way they're defining it, is not that great. So, and it's a perfectly fine home. So, I don't know. I think I've said what I've said. I think it's.
So in order to raise a road, we'd have to have every home on that street?
Well, I think that's what the struggle is from an engineering standpoint, is doing your drainage so that you're not impacting the inequitable elevations that will be resulting from, you got a house that now is, a lot higher than other houses, and how do you raise the road up when, where's all that water going to go?
But it's still going to be decades on most streets at a minimum before you'd be able to raise a road anyhow, right?
Yeah, but ultimately you're going to have to.
If everybody has to be at that elevation and you got, 4 or 5 homes,
I think there's going to be an arms race as well. If the majority of houses on one street are raised, then the remaining houses will probably get the brunt of it, plus. So
they're going to get torn. His history would apply. If we look at what happened in the town, history comes in and people start demolishing and rebuilding.
Right. You get the new, animal spirit cycle, and then a lot of stuff get done. I think the balance, if I recall from the last meeting, there was a little bit of balance between a 5-year where the turnover in this town. You come in, you don't know what renovation's been done. You're trying to do a reasonable project, and you get trapped into redoing the entire house. And a free-for-all where people can just piecemeal renovate the entire house without tripping, without hitting that limit. So I think it's got to be somewhere in between, and I'm not sure where the way it's worded is not the right way to go.
To Ken's point, it's only the value of the improvements, not even the land. It excludes the land. And your point about the house down here, I mean, if you look at the house, it's 30 years old, 4 years old. What's the real appraised value? It's just the improvements.
That's where we get into the problem. But it's a perfectly fine home.
Yes.
And guess what? None of the other houses are going to be impacted in that area, and we're not raising the road.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in order to raise the road down there, we'd have to go above the ridge. That ain't ever going to happen, right? So let's look at the reality of this. Like I said, with the exceptions that we put in, and we can put an exclusion, it can't be an add-on. We can define it. We can, we can work with this definition to say, well, it can't be an add-on. It can't be, if you do that, then all bets are off. I think that's reasonable.
After 2 years.
After 2 years, but at the exception, as long as we have the exceptions for the storm hardening and some of these, like the windows and the things like that, I'm okay with the 2 years. I get it. I mean, I see where somebody could play the game, and they do. Let's face it, they do play the game. So
Yeah,
somewhere
but this has
between.
us playing the game and forcing them out. That's my issue.
Well,
like
we're actually not
working-
now with the
Yeah,
modified
but the way
definition.
it was constructed, it looks like we're doing everything we can to force anybody out who's not the current flood elevation requirement. Because we're not going to allow them to have a reasonable opportunity to improve their home.
If we don't have these exceptions. If we have these
Well,
exceptions, that's
well,
a
the way it's
reasonable
written now.
opportunity.
No, you're saying we're building in for a further exception, I think,
I
right?
agree.
Yes.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
The way our current code is, I would agree that we're forcing people. With redefining it and, having these exceptions, it's giving a little bit of balance to that tug of war that's taking place.
Have we identified how many homes? Or do we have that as part of our comprehensive plan? We have a lot of data here. Do we have the number of homes that do not meet current or future floodplain elevations? I mean, that would tell us a lot, wouldn't it?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of. I'm sure we have it, we just haven't.
I'd kind of like to know that.
I agree.
Yeah, it's good
We're
to
talking
know.
about 5 or
Yeah.
100? Or
Is it
200?
half?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's got to be half, right?
Right.
It's got to be at least half.
Just visibly, yeah, I would
I'd say
say,
it's
if
half.
not more.
Significant.
What is it, 7 feet now is what does it have to be? The floodplain elevation, is it 7 feet?
It was 9.
9 feet.
I thought it was 9.
9?
Yeah.
I think for the new
So they
insurance,
increase
it's
it.
9.
So everybody knows the 2024 maps will be approved in December, and they're already ready to go. The 67-32 code, which is where the best available data comes from, if you look at the whole code, it has the minimum finished floor elevations, and it talks about 7 and 8. So the 2017 BFE was 6, basically throughout the whole town.
But they changed the definition now. It's the lowest part of your house. So it's not your finished floor of your living space. I think your garage is now triggering a non-compliance. Like our
For
garage is.
insurance, it
For,
is.
for insurance. The
Yes.
garage, they've changed it for insurance, that the garage
I don't think
now.
these guys are getting that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that,
Yeah.
but they always had to have
You don't
the
need to.
flood proofing, like we were saying, even before this. So they are allowed to have the garages that below the finished floor that I'm aware of. Maybe I'll have to look that up.
No, for insurance, I think they've
That's
done.
yes.
I'm sorry, keep going.
Sorry, I don't.
It's going from
I'm not
6
sure.
then to, as you said, 7 to 8?
Well, no, the BFE is 6 right now.
Yes.
Well, now it's different, but now it varies. It's not just 6. 8, 9, 10. So you can't have just this blanket finished floor at 8. So, but before 2020, really, we started this 2020, 21 of using the best available data. Yeah, so all the finished floors should be at 8 for that construction era of 17.
That's the minimum across the town, then it can grow up.
So
grow
now
from
there's
there?
No, that was it. It was 6 or nothing.
Right.
Now it varies. So you can't just say.
But what's the base level that the minimum has to be across the variation? Is it 8? Is it
The
9?
base level, there's 8.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the base
Okay.
flood elevation. So that would be at 9. And then you go up. Does that make sense?
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Is it, so how do you, okay, so it's 6 now, and
Well, not anymore. It
Why
was
not?
at 6.
it was at 6,
Yeah.
and now it's 8?
No, now it varies.
Okay, but just tell me how it varies, that's all. Like from the,
Okay.
you said the lowest point of the finished floor in a home, it varies, or?
It varies
By
on your
area,
location.
right?
The
Yeah.
base flood elevation is what's on the maps.
Yep.
The finished floor is 1 foot above.
Okay.
So if your base flood elevation is at 8, your finished floor is at 9.
Got it.
But there are areas that are at 9, 10, even 11
Like-
base flood elevation.
Mark, there's a house that just got built down the end of, I think, Marlin, that because it's the end of the canal, it's that at the point of intersecting the intercoastal waterway, that had to be even at a higher
Right.
elevation.
There,
So it's
Yeah.
the point lots have higher elevations than the lots interior next to them. One adjoining lot next to them, there have to be different. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay. So that's why she said it could vary depending on,
where.
and this is all driven by, these variations are driven by whom?
FEMA?
FEMA, right? So we're just,
Yeah, they did all the
Palm Beach
modeling.
County, FEMA, Palm Beach County.
Palm Beach County did appeal that didn't go through, so these new maps are those 2019 maps.
Are we gonna approve homes on stilts pretty soon?
Soon, yes.
That would be,
Cool.
My home's already on stilts,
Yeah, mine's on too. Yeah, we're all on.
or pilings.
We're all on pilings.
That's
No,
what it's
no, I
still.
mean stilts.
Yeah.
Different.
but then you can have garages underneath.
Yeah.
So one of the issues with all this is that with the new FEMA maps being approved in December, we need to have these ordinances
Yes.
in place with that. So we're already actually behind the curve in terms of moving this forward to the town commission, because obviously there's 2 readings. I was advised at one of my cities that there's now supposedly coming out a rule that they're going to require for federal grants and federal loans that you be 2 feet above your base flood level, and or 18 inches above the crown of the street, whichever is higher. So there's more to come on this, and obviously I think we all know that things are going to have to move up.
I do know
Then we
municipalities
raise
are
our
allowed
streets and we make
to
everybody non-conforming.
change.
Right.
Like West Palm has been 2 feet above. The Village of Palm Springs basically has no floodplain, very, very few, so it doesn't really apply.
The irony of this, as we have seen in the past few storms, the flooding has occurred west as opposed to us. Not to say that we're immune from it, but, the western communities have been flooded way more
Rain
than
events.
we have, and they have a higher standard. So it's
I mean, yeah, they've been
it's-
coming in a different direction.
Right.
Let's get back to this.
Sorry.
What again, what you've heard here, Christie, from the board members, what changes would we make to the existing language based on the feedback you've got?
I think I like to keep things simple.
Yes.
And move it forward. I think if we allow for the storm hardening to be an exception within the exception, so that folks can improve their impact windows, improve their roof, what have you, add talions, whatever, for insurance purposes, and you do the look back for a year, I think that will help to prevent people from coming into hardship. I wouldn't recommend completely eliminating a look back.
Oh, no, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's
So
that's not wise.
I know we can make some other carve outs for getting into specific things, but I think then it makes it trickier for staff and our building official to really then have to get into the nitty gritties. And I'd rather say if it's gonna be 2 years, great, if it's gonna be 1 year, great, just make it easy across the board.
And
So,
then
okay.
not
I'm
take
sorry.
Ken's proposed language that it doesn't have to be a violation. So
Well, I think
not
we've
have
run
that, with the
into-
1 year, you would be okay without that modification.
I would, but I have a question for you. Explain how you defined it, because, they're gonna have to interpret this. So it says, and I'm looking on page 20, subparagraph 1 under substantial improvement. So it says, code violations identified by the building official and that are minimum necessary to assure safe living conditions, including but not limited to storm hardening measures. Was your intent by that language to accept out only violations that require storm hardening, or is it the violations and the storm hardening? If it's the violations and the storm hardening, I'm good.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get where you're at. I know it's further down in here.
That makes sense?
Highlighted.
Understand, yeah.
It's page 38 to 47.
I do want to add to that, my comment that 1 year period might as well not have one in a way, because any substantial project that's going to get into,
Takes more than a year.
it's going to take time. So, maybe 2 years, but
From completion or from filing? Maybe
So-
if it's from completion, then you're,
if you're going to do 2 in a row,
right.
right? So you're going to finish one before doing the other.
So your time clock starts at the completion of the first project, not at the filing of it.
Sure.
Then it really is 2 years.
So a whole year would have to go by.
Right.
This says
So,
permitted, so
Yeah.
when it's permitted. it's when the
It's a
clock-
minor point.
So I think when I read this, I viewed the safety code violations identified by the building official didn't necessarily address existing health sanitary issues. But I think it's a good point to maybe clarify that my intent with adding in the storm hardening would be is if you're doing storm hardening, it gets extracted out of the calculation, regardless of whether it's something that the building official identified. If you want to improve your, ability to withstand a storm, that's not going to get counted in the 50% calculation.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Yes.
Just define, just
Just to
clarify
clarify
that. So you can put and as opposed to
Yep.
including but not limited to. A year or two, I think it's well within, is within either one.
I'd like the 2, by the way, just because we're
Okay.
talking about the time frame. So that's a good point. Absolutely.
So the recommendation is 2.
Yeah, well, you have those two.
Does that, how do you
Now
feel?
that we have those exceptions, I'm okay with
Yes.
two, as I said
Okay.
before.
Yeah.
I was okay
Do you
with
also add an exclusion if it's a change in home ownership?
It was not. That was
it becomes tricky. Now the onus is gonna be on the homeowners to make sure they disclose what they've done in the 2 years prior. So, this
Do you get a
is-
fresh look
this
back
is-
if it's a true arm's length purchase?
Technically, you're not supposed
No.
to.
You don't, you wouldn't. right?
I can see some lawsuits coming on that one.
Oh, yeah. No, that's, in fact, just as a side note, right now, their request, they were suggesting that there be in every transaction, a flood notification that that's signed at the time of sale. And that's because people weren't disclosing that they had some sort of flood issue or water issue. Not talking about water damage, I'm talking about a flooding issue.
I'm talking about the 2-year look back for being able to make an improvement to your home. If you go
Yes.
buy a house, you want to improve it right before you move in. You don't want to end up saying, no, you can't do it.
Well,
You
we've had
can't put
that
the
issue.
kitchen in because,
Yeah, we've had that issue here because they'd look back and the prior owner had all this
Sure,
stuff
done work,
done.
right.
And so they were prevented from doing it.
That's if
That is,
somebody
that's
looks
an
back.
issue.
That's the issue. I mean, a realtor's not gonna advise, oh yeah, you need to look back and see how much they spent in the last 2 years or year, by the time you file for your permit. I just see that as a real
I think that's why we moved from 5 years to 2 years. That was the main issue. And again, we're gonna, if you're gonna reset it, and you can transfer ownership to your others, yeah, I don't know.
So go to
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah.
So then go to 1 year rather than 2. Because if you buy a house, you want to wait 2 years or a year to start your
I
renovation.
mean,
Well, I can say this, I do a lot of code enforcement, and I do it a lot for Palm Beach County. From a code enforcement perspective, if a prior owner did unpermitted work, they can come after the current owner. So I advise everybody nowadays, when you're buying an older home, you want to go look at that jurisdiction's permit records and make sure that what you're buying has the proper permits. It should be everybody's due diligence nowadays in buying a home to understand what was permitted and what was not in that home you're buying. So I understand that you want to allow a new owner to be able to do whatever they want with the property, but I do think there should be some due diligence on a new owner's part to understand everything that they're getting into with buying a home. And so, because that's an issue, and I think nowadays real estate agents have to be aware of, they might be buying a house that has a lot of unpermitted stuff. And when they go into the building department to make a renovations, and the building department says, we have absolutely no record of this having been done, it's all unpermitted.
So, by the way, this helps prevent some of that.
Yes.
Because the more restrictions you put on something, the more likelihood there's going to be people saying, I'm not going to get a permit for it, right? So this helps that process by reducing the regulations that you're imposing on people. And in answer to your question, since the permitting process is public knowledge, the due diligence would be kind of difficult, because then you have to assess what the value of that improvement was. There's going to be more onus, but whether it's 5, 2, or 1, you still have the same issue. And they're making it more challenging. So,
Fine. 2.
2.
We'll
2.
stick with 2. Do we make is there,
before we do that,
Yes.
let's hear from staff.
Yes.
What's been your experience
and the public
in the
if there's
real
any?
world? What's the issue been? Talk to me, somebody. No comments?
Not at all, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I agree with Christy. In other municipalities, you can come in, buy a house, and then there's permits that are unresolved, and then you have to deal with that. So that's on the people, it's on real estate agents, it's on the city or town. And then also, the addition, this is where all this mess has come from. Like, you have a house, you want to add an addition, but that's not at the current finished floor, and what do you do with that? So making that exception, I agree with that.
So, yeah, and I agree that it would not include that if somebody's adding onto their home and then doing that stuff, that's different than taking the base home. So we're gonna have to tweak this language before it goes to the commission a
So,
little bit. Yeah.
A renovation in addition to your home the new addition would have to be at the new level.
Yeah, but I think that would change, but wait a minute, that would change how the scope of this becomes, because you're changing the house completely. If you're doing an add-on like that, you're changing the house. So now, do we then take away the storm hardening provisions if they're adding on?
No.
Because now that's,
How about if we go with what we just discussed? And then if they see an abuse of dealing with this, it can be brought back in the future.
I'm okay with that too.
So how is a motion made for this particular amendment?
Well, I'll make one.
Christie.
I may move that we adopt language as identified for substantial improvement as revised by the town attorney, with the exception of adding the storm hardening measures in addition to any safety code violations, and limiting it to 2 years. look back.
Second,
I second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
I did.
Buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, moving on.
What's the over under? When is this coming back?
Actually, I think this is, realistically, I think this is good.
Yeah,
Look at our meeting agenda.
this is good because the commissioners.
We could put it on one of the future dates now.
No, seriously, I think this is good because we're making the exceptions that should be made.
Right.
And I think that eliminates a lot of the
I
problem.
remember it last one.
I think it's a reasonable compromise.
Yeah.
So we're talking now about the comp plan updates, and I guess Corey, we're looking to you at this point, right?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Board members, Corey O'Gorman, Town Planner. This is an item that we, at your last meeting, we distributed copies of the draft amendments to the comprehensive plan. The drafts that were distributed were based on several meetings with staff to go over what changes have occurred in the town since the last comprehensive plan update. And as is indicated in the staff report, the Florida statutes require an update every 7 years. So we're at that 7-year period. Our timing is that we need to have amendments submitted by spring of next year, April, is that right, Jim? Okay. And this is Jim Fleischman with me. Jim and I are working together on this. He's got substantial experience with comprehensive plans in smaller communities in the Palm Beach County area. So he's been a great asset for us to help work through some of these issues. So the proposal before you with the draft language changes really reflects mostly housekeeping items that we've identified in 3 or 4 meetings that we've had with key staff members, updates in population projections, changes to reflect organizational changes in the town and the county, and the Planning and Zoning Board in the town of Ocean Ridge is the designated local planning agency. So you as a board have a responsibility to make a recommendation to the town commission for updates to the comprehensive plan. The meeting today, having distributed the plan to you at last meeting, and I realize some of you weren't able to attend last meeting, so Kelly provided you with a hard copy of the plan. We're really here to workshop for you to discuss, to take into consideration the changes that we've identified thus far, to provide us with some input on those changes, to identify anything else that you believe needs to be updated or changed. And then at your next meeting, you can come back as an action item and make a recommendation. There are, of course, all kinds of different alternatives for moving this item forward. Once again, this is a workshop item, so it's really discussion for the board at this time. And there's certainly a lot of material. I'm one that likes to think about these things a little bit, have a discussion, and Jim is going to talk about suggestions for moving forward as well. So what I'd like to do at this point is just let you know that we do have several handouts to provide you with. We have a data analysis report that is another element that's required to submit as part of the update. And it's really sort of a document summary for you that might be something that will be helpful to work through the plan itself, some updated maps, and some written comments that were provided by one of the alternate members. So that being said, I'm going to introduce Jim Fleischman. Jim is going to take it from here for you.
Okay, thanks, Corey. As Corey said, that each of you got I'd like to call it a preliminary draft, because there were some holes in it of the comp plan update, and I do have a couple of handouts that that I'd like to pass out today that will supplement a little bit some of the information that you already have. And I'm not necessarily going to pass these out all at once. I'm going to pass them out a couple different times during the presentation, but I'd like to start out by, we have prepared all of the maps in their final form now that are going to go in the document. So we'd like to hand those out to start with, and you can just insert those in the proper places in the documents that you already have. And as I said,
Thank you, Cory.
Unless there are any changes, those will be the final maps that go in the comprehensive plan. Now, some of them are pretty hard to read, and that's primarily because of the configuration of the town. The town is long and skinny, so trying to get that on an 8.5 by 11 sheet is a little bit of a battle. In the final documents, we can include 11 by 17 versions of those maps, so that they're a lot more readable, and you can see some of the detail. The other document that I'd like to distribute at this point is an updated version of the recreation and open space element. We have a little bit difficulty understanding how the data and analysis in the current plan was actually written, formatted, and categorized. So we did a rewrite of the recreation and open space element, which I'd like to pass. We didn't change any of the goals, objectives, and policies in the document that you have, but prepared an update to the data and analysis, which I think makes it a little more understandable and readable. Now, in general, the comprehensive plan has 10 basic elements. Six of the elements have supporting data and analysis in the document that you have, and four of them have just the goals, objectives, and policies. The six that have data and analysis, and the six that do have data and analysis really are oriented to meeting statutory requirements that certain data and analysis be included in the comprehensive plan. And that's the future land use, transportation, housing, and I'm going to call the wastewater, solid waste, drainage as infrastructure, recreation and open space, and capital improvements. Those elements, in addition to the data and the goals, objectives, and policies, also have updated data and analysis components. Most of the update is related to incorporating newly required population projections. We have to update those each time we do the update. And we also included more current census information in some of the elements. The census data that's in the current plan, based on my best recollection, is from 2020. So it's quite dated, and we did update that. We also updated information provided by Florida Department of Transportation in terms of traffic counts. So the basic data and analysis update is pretty standard, and it's all been prepared using reliable sources, and I feel that it's actually quite accurate. The recreation and open space, the inventory of the recreation and conservation areas in the town was a little difficult for us, but I think that we finally have gotten a handle on that, and the current map on that is included in the recreation and open space element that I just handed out. And that is something that I'd like you all to take a look at, just to make sure that we got everything on that map. Like I said, it was a little difficult to put together because of the fact that different ownerships. There was one beach has some ownership, the town has some ownership, county has some ownership, and there was different designations and programs. I think we have a pretty good handle on it at this point. The elements that have only goals, objectives, and policies are coastal management, conservation, intergovernmental coordination, and property rights. Those four elements, we made very few changes in the goals, objectives, and policies, figuring that what's in the plan now is accurate and did not require any updates. The principal objective in my mind of your job in this process really is to take a look at any revisions that we're proposing to the goals, objectives, and policies. The document that you had passed out before in an underline and strike through in yellow highlight format includes recommendations to the data analysis and the goals, objectives, and policies. Most of the recommendations to the goals, objectives, and policies are essentially wording changes, attempts to maybe clarify the policies a little bit better. I guess every time somebody takes a look at a document, that person has a particular way of wording things. We believe that the wording changes that we made clarify the intent of the goals, objectives, and policies a little bit, as opposed to what is in the plan now. As I said, we think that your primary responsibility is to take a look at the goals, objectives, and policies. Take a look at the changes that we're proposing. Take a look at the wording that's in the plan that we haven't touched to see if you think there should be some changes. Now, as I said, the document is relatively complex because of all of the underlined strike through and yellow highlighting. One of the requirements of statutory requirements is that we provide a basic data and analysis document to accompany the comprehensive plan update, and we prepared that document, which I'd also like to hand out. And in my mind, this document will assist you in focusing in on the goals, objectives, and policies. It's a much more clear, precise discussion of each of the revisions to the goals, objectives, and policies. So I think that as you go through and review, particularly goals, objectives, and policies, I think that document will help a lot to focus in on that component of the plan. And as part of my introduction, I'm going to propose a rather unique way of generating your involvement in the process. A couple of weeks ago, we received a 2-page comments from Polly Joa. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her last name properly. Where she went through and gave us a list, a 2-page list of all of her comments. And what I'm thinking is that if you take the data analysis document that we just handed out and follow her lead and give us a page or two of your specific comments, then we can take all of those comments, put them together in one document and come back with specific responses to your comments. Hopefully we can do that in one document, bring it back at the local planning agency public hearing. And if that's an acceptable procedure, I think we can get through this in one more meeting. So I'd like to also hand those out, just so you can see her comments. And that's the first time that I've ever suggested that we have a procedure like that, but I really think it's a good idea. And I think it can expedite the process and help you guys focus in on your specific task of looking at the goals, objectives, and policies. Now, I wasn't necessarily at this point planning on going through page by page of the document that we already handed out, but I do think that we should have at least a short discussion on any issues that you have already identified.
First off, Jim and Corey, thank you very much for all the work that you put into this. If I could ask you on a higher level, because I did look through the comments that you made, right? When you're starting this process, you're looking at changes that are going across from other, I take communities as well, other comprehensive plan updates, because you talk about, like, for instance, the issue that has arisen over the past few years of the condominiums, and maintenance of condominiums, and how that whole, you've got 3 pages of new writing on that, right? So you can see that, fire suppression systems, you've got a whole section on that, right? Is this kind of commonplace to how you usually do these updates, when you take updates from the county or the state and incorporate those into this?
Well, usually when we bring policies, objectives from other places, those are based on Florida statutory requirements that all comprehensive plans have to include those.
Okay.
I don't, for example, I just got through working with Loxahatchee Groves on a very intensive, town council had 12 workshops that itself, going through page by page. I don't take specific language from other plans unless it's in my mind a good way of expressing a state requirement.
Okay.
I definitely try not to bring in useless goals, objectives, and policies from another place just to squeeze it into your plan.
Good, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just one thing to point out, also from sort of a big picture perspective.
Yes.
The purpose, of course, and I should have started with this, but the purpose, of course, for the comprehensive plan is that it is the policy document of each community in the state of Florida, municipality and county, that guides land development regulations and actions such as that. And the land development code and implementation of the land development code is required to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So it is a big picture policy document that provides a foundation for future development in the community. So
Got it.
just
And has our staff been participating in this process of these changes?
Yes,
Does
sir.
that incorporate the staff's?
Yeah.
And the consultants' views as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we've had 4 meetings with the staff, and I think consulting engineer has been at 3 of those. And some of the changes I think that you're talking about were policy recommendations that were raised by the staff or by the town engineer.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that
Comments?
question. So thank you for answering. Who participated from the staff level?
The clerk, manager, and then back at the very first one, Manny was there.
Okay.
And the police chief was there. And
Building official.
Yeah.
Okay.
And town engineer.
So that's good. So they all had some comment. It would have been helpful to know what their comments were as well. But I think, a lot of this stuff, at least my experience has been in dealing with this the past few times, not going to change. The vast majority of it is, we just got to get through it. I think it would be helpful though, in looking at some of the changes you would have, Christy, if you could go through it. And for those that were statutory, because I noticed some statutory, what I think are statutory changes, only because I know some of the statutes have changed. So I think it would be helpful for you to go through it and tell us which ones that, we're not, don't waste your time because we have to have that in there. For example, page, the closing permits and the reviewing for building permits. I know that's statutory, the changes. I would be helpful for you to see what their language that they put in, to see if it matches up with what the statute requires, right? And what that deviation would be.
I can tell you right now, from a legal standpoint, the private property rights element is mandated by statute. We added it previously, and some cities have tried to get creative with that language. When you try to get creative with it, it often gets rejected by the state.
Right.
So that's one thing that I would not waste your time on trying to play with that language. They like it to be just as it is in the statute.
And that's what would be helpful to us, right? If we know that, listen, no matter what we look at, we're not going to be changing paragraph, section, whatever it is. I think that's helpful.
Would that be everything referenced by statute then? Pursuant to section 553.791, Florida statute, that's all statute related.
I can go through it, but I just know for that element itself, I wouldn't waste any time on it.
Some of the things in here that I saw that were statutory weren't referencing the statute. So I know that there were changes that came down. So I just happened to know that.
Yes.
So then I saw them there, but I didn't go back to the statute itself to see if the language matches up. And I just think from the town attorney's perspective, I think it would be beneficial if she then takes this document and says, yes, this is what has to be done. So this way we're not wasting a lot of time and effort trying to reinvent something that we don't have to reinvent.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out something on 3-2, table 3 of the demographic characteristics analysis.
What page you on again, Mark?
3-2.
He's in the
New maps.
I'm in the document that we were given earlier.
it's not in the copy. That was in the thing that they gave out last time.
So when you go to Ocean Ridge, Palm Beach County in Florida, and you have the respective population and housing units, Ocean Ridge doesn't seem to match up well because everybody else is like 45% of their population are in housing units, and we're 95%. So I just point that out.
Okay, now, where was that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so is this what you have?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So go to Ocean Ridge, Palm Beach County of Florida, and
Right.
go to population. 1,712, right? And then go down to housing units, 1,638. That means that, right,
Most of the single.
that doesn't,
Yeah,
compared to Palm Beach County, which is 1,005,000 and 700,000 in Florida.
well, that's, yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, it is right, because the population is resident population, it does not include seasonal. Okay, so if you're talking about the number of people that are here in February, March, it very likely is substantially higher than that. But the 1712 represents permanent residents, meaning that you live here at least 6 months and 1 day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody that's here seasonally for a period less than that is not counted in that number. So, and we really don't have a good handle on what the seasonal population is here, unless the town has done some sort of count or inventory on its own. This information is strictly census based. So I mean, that's a good observation, because you look at it and say, no, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. But it is statistically right.
So that's statistically, it's,
Yeah, right.
okay, thank you.
Comments?
The other thing it would be helpful is to know, given what the staff recommendations are, to know what they were, I should say. And so that we can have an understanding of the rationale behind those recommendations being made that are in here. Because right now, we see changes, but we have no idea. They might be statutory, they might be staff induced, there might be some basis for making that change that we're not aware of. And we may agree or may not agree. So without hearing what those changes were or the recommendations, it's kind of hard to, not hard, but I think it's just helpful to know.
Yeah, that, some of those, I know we can identify, some of them, some of the minor wording changes, because we did have discussions about, for example, a policy makes a statement. Staff felt that, well, okay, that's fine, except that we would like to have it worded this way. And we probably did try to keep track of the specifics of that during all of our meetings. Staff really did not make any, in my mind. Well, there was a couple, for example, the one related to historic structures. We deleted all of the references to this historic preservation, which really is a requirement, a state requirement, but since we don't have any historic structures. And
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That doesn't preclude the town from designating historic.
So, I mean, what you're doing is causing me to want to go page by page. I hate to say this, because we don't have the luxury of knowing what went on.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna, other than Christie going back and saying these sections are statutory, don't bother changing, then we can go back and say, look at those provisions, look at those recommendations, have an understanding of what the rationale behind those recommendations are for us to make an informed decision as to whether or not they're good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, I appreciate Polly doing what she's doing,
Yeah.
and I think that's all good. If those that want to do it, be my guest. What I want to do is hear. I
Okay.
want to have that, I mean, the whole purpose of it is for us to have a discussion as to the rationale behind making whatever changes that you're making, not just accumulate what we tell you and putting it in there. I'd like to hear why we're doing something,
Okay, well.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's not really that many changes
They're
that
not
we're
statute-
making. I mean, we
statutory, yeah.
can, I mean, this is not something that can't be zipped through, quite frankly. It doesn't have to be today. I'd rather give Christie the chance, with all deference to the chairman, I'd rather give Christie the chance to go through it, look at it, determine what is fixed in point. You being prepared to come back and us going through it and being able to explain, or Lynn or whoever, I don't care who, to explain, okay, this is what a change that we propose. I'm not talking about the minor word. I'm not talking about the minor stuff. I'm not talking about that.
I thought you were talking about all that.
And
stuff.
is, and I know you're changing is for an and,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not talking about that. So I'm talking about the bigger picture items.
Sure.
But regardless, going page by page, other than the statutory things, and we can then examine and be thoughtful in what these, what.
Can we identify that though?
recommendations-
You know, Christie, you've asked Christie to do that. Can we identify those items, guys?
Yeah, we
Jim?
can do that. I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were talking about every single underline and strike through that, who generated that. If you're talking about the issues, new policies, things like that, yeah.
No, for
yeah.
example,
Yeah, we can do that.
yeah. For example, I'm just throwing this out there. Page 61, mandatory structural inspections. I have no idea what this is. But, you know, this might be something that's statutory, and you just tell us, this is, you know, Chris will say, no, this is, can't change. I checked the verbiage. I confirmed, Christie confirmed the verbiage, that it matches with the statute. Check, done, good, blessed. There's some other section here that's read it out. No, that's not statutory, but you can tell us, well, in our staff meetings, we felt, Lynn felt, or whoever, we don't care who, but it was collective effort that this is our recommendation to the town and this is why we're doing it. Then we can hear that and then make, well, we agree with you or disagree with you.
Okay. Do you want us to do that just for the changes? Because if we go through the entire plan, I'm sure we're going to highlight language in the existing plan that's not required by the Florida statutes.
Well, okay, so now you just,
What you want us to do, that's all.
so-
Sounds like quite a
And
process.
stuff that you have not looked, you've made a determination, or staff, that you don't want to make the changes to that.
Right.
You're saying, should you highlight it to us so we can review it and
Yeah.
discuss it?
Or do you just want us to look at the changes that we have proposed?
okay, so this raises a different issue.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me that there's stuff in here that is no longer required by statute, but you're opting to leave it in, I'd like to know that. Because why are we leaving it in if it's not required? Right? If it was a prior requirement. If there's a change here that was required by statute, those are the things I was referencing before. You
Right.
made changes here that were required by statute, that were, as long as it mirrors the statutory language, we really have no say in it. Is that accurate?
Well, if it's required by the statutes, we really don't have any say. However, part of the entire reason and basis for a comprehensive plan is for local governments to identify local issues. A lot of those local issues are not necessarily required to be addressed in the Florida statutes. The town has made a decision previously that they wanted this in their plan, whether or not it was required by the statutes or not.
Well, I think that's a little deviation from what I'm asking. So first, we understand that if it's required and you redlined it, it's statutory, she's gonna review it. If it matches the statutory language, that's a check off the list, right? You got that. But if you're telling me that prior to this time, there were statutory language that we had, because you made the statement, you made the statement, which causes me to question it. You said that there was stuff in here that was statutory that is no longer statutory, but you didn't change. I'd like to know why. Is there something we should change? One of the things that our job is to do is to identify the issues. We just, just to come up with issues is, that's a whole nother animal. But if there's something in here that needs our attention, I hope it's being brought to us so that we can discuss it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things that we've done is make all the changes that staff believes are necessary. And that's what we're asking of the board
Okay.
also, is to tell us what are things that you believe need to be changed as well. So I think in part we've done what you're asking.
Because the staff has reviewed what he's talking about already, potentially,
Yes, sir.
what Ken's talking about.
So if there
Yeah.
are things that you believe should be changed, we'd certainly like to know that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, but what you also have to point out, at least we have in the past. I'm just going from past experience. It's been pointed out to us. What are issues that we should be
Yes.
thinking about, right? Here's an issue that it's in here now, but you know what? These are things that, collectively our staff feels that we should be thinking about and maybe making one change. That's number one. Number two is, these are areas of change that we may want to consider. Not that, there's a recommendation that you're making, but there are certain things within the comprehensive plan that are primarily local in nature. That these are things that we should be thinking about, as opposed to just, come up with an issue. So helping us define what potential issues are, and what we really should be. We're not going to be dealing with the fire suppression, right? That's statutory. I know that. The closing the permits, that's statutory. I know that. So, but what things in here are not that we should be, these are within your purview that you really should be dealing with and taking a serious look at. Or do you want us to just go through it and we'll give you thousands of comments on stuff that we shouldn't be talking about?
I think
don't
you,
want to waste your time.
I think a
Thank
lot-
you. I don't want to waste my time either, and that's why I'm trying to help.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, maybe a slightly different reframing there. Since this is a strategic document that will maybe you should pull from it some key points, I think, to what Ken is saying, to help us understand, instead of going into the details of redlining and so on, just come up with a set of changes. Like strategically, these are the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 things that have changed in here. That way we can discuss it at a policy level, not at a document kind of highlighting level.
Non-statutory items.
Whatever's remaining, like
Yeah.
boil it to the essence that we can have a reasoned discussion around it versus, going through a few 100-page document and, the tables of data and so on and so forth. It's a waste of everybody's time. Maybe that's what Ken was, I'm not sure if I interpreted.
Close enough. You got it. You got the point.
I think the document, the data and analysis document that we just passed out
does that.
will help you a lot in that regard, because it focuses specifically on the changes to goals, objectives, and policies.
Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't get into any of the other stuff.
Thank you.
And you talk about gym elements, right? That, like you handed out the recreation and open space element. You talked about 3 or 4 more elements. Is that correct?
No, that's the only element that has substantial changes.
Okay.
Over and above what we gave you before.
Okay.
And I said, I'd like you to take the other one out and put this one in.
Okay. That substitutes it. Okay. Well, we can review this and maybe still, if we could get, I'd like Ken's idea for Christie just to, let's figure out what we don't need to look at. Check that off. And if there's anything still as the staff specifically has given us, and well, give us 1 minute. We're going to do that. And then, and we'll go from there. Just public comment. Do we have any more board member comments here? Mark? Been awful quiet over there.
I'm just absorbing all this discussion.
Okay.
And appreciate all the commentary.
Okay,
And I think refining those issues or changes that are relevant to our review are a good suggestion.
Good, okay, great. Public comment?
Good morning, Carolyn Cassidy, 7 Hudson. My concerns are mainly about the land use element. I talked to Corey about this after the last meeting. At the last meeting, Christy did mention that she'd like to see tighter language and we should have a separate meeting for this. And so this is not the public hearing, correct?
No,
When,
this is a workshop.
okay. A couple of things in here, just, it seems to me like things need to be a little bit better defined. Like you mentioned in section 1.5 that conservation areas need to have like an environmental report requirement, but that's not defined anywhere. So do you mean an environmental impact statement? And also in, like you mentioned, wetland areas in section 1.3 shall be designated preservation conservation. That wetland needs to be defined because there are mangrove properties that are wetland that are residential. But my biggest concern is that on the future land use map, we only have multifamily as one category. It's not medium density or high density. Everything is defined as high density multifamily, 10 units per acre. So what's to stop in the future if we get public sewer from someone taking one of these medium density and wanting to develop it as high density? All you need is a different commission to say, sure, we're going to change the zoning because the comp plan doesn't address it. So it just appears to be the elephant in the room to me. Thank you.
Good part of this map is multifamily. I don't know what percentage of the town is, but it's,
But they're not,
More
there's
than
no
50% of
distinguishing
the
on
town.
this map.
excuse me?
There's no distinguishing on their map
Between low
what's
and
high
high.
density and what's medium density. And the definition.
Have you been working on that at the commission level?
Sorry?
Have you been working on that or discussing that at the commission level?
No. We're waiting for this.
I think that's a very good observation.
Okay, so the response to that would be to, looking at this map 1 in the future land use element, taking a look at all of the multiple family designated areas and dividing them up into high and medium. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm sorry, do we have low, high, and medium in town or just?
What do we have currently?
Yeah,
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, from a future land use perspective, we have single family and multifamily. That's
Yep.
how the comprehensive plan defines it. In the zoning regulations, there is RMM, which is residential medium density and limited to 5 units per acre, and RHM, residential high density, which is limited to 10 units per acre. So I think what's being suggested is that consistent, so to speak, with the residential medium density zoning designation, that perhaps the Planning and Zoning Board might want to consider amending the future land use map to have a medium density multifamily, which would be 5 units an acre.
So it follows the zoning designation?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And so how do we do that?
Where in town do
How
we
do we
have
get that
high density?
incorporated into the plan?
Well, we would just revise map 1.
Right.
To take the 1 MF category and break that down into 2.
Okay.
The 5.
Can you do that for us? Can you do that for us, Corey? Can you take this map and divide it up just so we can look at it?
Well,
Is it that easy or
folks in
not?
Ingenuity could do it for us. They're doing the maps. for
Right.
us, yes.
Yeah, for me, it's not as much seeing the map as to know that as we get down the road, that's a great point. I mean, who knows whenever we may get public sanitation, but.
Just one question on that. So that's land use versus zoning.
Yeah, it is,
So
right.
if you go on Papa, there's land use versus zoning. So now you're asking to revise the land use?
Yeah, I think some of the confusion, it doesn't really matter because your zoning, I think, Chrissy, you can correct me, but the zoning is the zoning, right? So they still have, whatever that area is designated within that district, still has to meet that district. It has nothing to do with how this map is drawn. So it's two different issues.
But I'd like to
It
hear
is,
from.
I
go
think
ahead.
what Commissioner Cassidy's point is, so your comp plan, as Corey mentioned, is sort of your policy decision that your land development regulations all have to be consistent with. So right now in your comp plan, you only have one land use designation of multifamily up to 10 acres. In your zoning, in your land development code, you break those up into medium and high. So the concern is because it's not distinguished in your comp plan, if someone were able to acquire the acreage and come in, all they would have to ask for is a rezoning. They wouldn't have to ask for a comprehensive plan amendment. And by putting it in your comprehensive plan, it doesn't mean it can't be changed, but what it means is it's one more hurdle that a developer would have to get through to get approval to change something to high density that's currently medium density. Comp plan amendments are always legislative decisions of the town commission, which means that it's not a quasi-judicial decision. They have legislative prerogative. It's a higher standard to challenge. If someone says, I disagree with you, it doesn't matter, it's a legislative decision, whereas zoning matters are quasi-judicial. So if they meet the criteria to rezone, technically they have to get it because it's quasi-judicial. Legislative is a much higher policy decision, and it's very hard to challenge a legislative decision. So if you put something in your comprehensive plan where you designate these areas can only be 5 acres or less in terms of density, it's a harder hurdle to get over than if it's just a zoning ordinance change. So that's what the difference is in technical terms.
And just to build off that for a moment.
I don't like this.
To go back to the question about showing the map, one thing that we could do is to provide a copy of the zoning map, which
Yes.
does show the breakdown between RHM and RMM.
Oh, it is?
And that
It's
that
in
might,
this one that we just got.
It's in this one? The zoning map's in here? Oh, it is, second to last.
It's
Yep.
zoning and planning.
thank you. I didn't even realize that.
We can't read it though. I mean, what,
Well, yeah, you gotta do it.
just give us, are the darker colors, is that high density or medium density?
The green,
The
that
green.
green is RHM.
It's all the condos and stuff.
Right, and that's high density?
Yeah, the green that's like at the north end of town.
No, but is that high
RHM.
density,
No,
Leonard?
that's high density.
Okay, the
And
green is high density?
That particular shade, there's a lighter shade of green on the south end along Old Ocean. And you can see, basically everything on the south end is RMM.
Yeah, if you look real close, you can see it.
Yeah, I'm just comparing the two.
I just don't think these maps are age appropriate.
Yeah.
Good point.
That's what the internet is for.
Nor is the FEMA flood map.
So yeah, just to run through that, if you want to take a look at that for a moment.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the zoning map, on the right-hand side, at the far right, it starts with PO, which of course is the park at the north end and the inlet. The properties to the immediate left or south of that are RHM, residential high density. And they continue as RHM until you get to the PC property on the east side of A1A. And on the west side of A1A, those lots that are between A1A and the single family are RMM, residential medium density. And then if you jump down to the south, or to the left of the map, those those areas are designated as RMM, residential medium density, and the balance of the zoning on the south end is RMM as well. So if we were to create a new future land use category, and speaking of age appropriate, and I go for my reading glasses so I can focus on y'all, sorry. It would be
Nice here.
creating a map that's similar
Mediums
to the
here.
zoning map
And then
in
I'll make
terms
it
of the multifamily density. Also, preparing some new goals, objectives, policies for, or at least policies for a residential medium density, and to specifying those differences between the RMM, or residential medium density, and the high density.
And that would be in this document.
Yes, sir. I hope that helps clarify.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Corey, what are the little gaps in between if we went back to the north end again, Oceanside, or the other side where it's in the high density, then there's a lighter shaded area. Is that consistent or is that an error on the zoning map? See where you got 3 or 4 parcels that are green, then you got a light colored something, and then you got 3 or 4 parcels that are green, or 5 parcels.
I believe those are the recreation parcels in the Ocean Club project.
Okay,
This is, that's the.
tennis
parking
court
lot.
and
That's
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Board members, any other comment on this? Mark?
No, now that I know what we're gonna do as the next step, I'm good.
Ken? Good?
Said my piece.
Yeah?
Good.
Betty, are we all good? Okay, great. Anything else from staff or the public?
So I think that what we're gonna do is come back to you at your next meeting with some input from Christie on what statutory. We will go through the substantive changes that are in the plan and identify the rationale. And where we can, we'll also identify areas that we haven't changed and try to be sure that we understand what the background is on those. And is there anything else that
So the comment component, you don't need it from us at this point.
if you want to give us some comments, I think that'd be great.
I actually would rather spend my time looking at more strategic ideas like what Caroline had brought up, than to go through the details at this level.
I do have a request. Can you, and so we don't have to kill any more trees, just at least get online, or whether online, or send us a link or something with the completed book, so that we're not looking at all these different, insert this page, or, give me one book that I'm looking at. Can you do that?
Yeah, sure, of course.
And can we also, would we be able to get the, what we're being asked to look at, would we be able to get that before the meeting?
Oh, yes.
A week or two before the meeting, so we're not just showing up at the meeting with it?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
What we would try to do is have prepared the response to your inquiries and your questions in a timing, so that we can get it out with the next agenda, so that you have at least a week or so to review before the meeting.
The more time, the better, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone involved. We appreciate it.
I have a quick question. So are we saying that we're going to do another workshop at the next meeting? And then we'll have a special meeting for the hearing?
I think that.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. I
When you
think
say
so.
special meeting, you would have, before the January 21st, 25 meeting?
Yes, that's what I was asking. If we have to have it in December, or are we just maybe gonna push it off to the January as the hearing?
Well, you're not going to do anything between the next meeting and the end of the year, theoretically, right? So in the beginning of the year, Do we just wait for the 21st? Have a workshop and then piece it
We have to
together
have
on the
this done by
21st?
what, March?
Has to be done by March.
March?
Are we okay if we,
So what's the timing on this?
yeah,
Well, that's supposed to be done by April 1st. And that's a deadline.
There's
that
a December
the state-
meeting. I think I'm
The state's
going.
given us. If for some reason we miss it, there's no consequences whatsoever. We can take our time and make sure that the document that is sent up to the state is one that satisfies all of our issues and concerns. There's no penalties, other than the fact that we cannot do any other comprehensive plan amendments until we do this one first.
so if we approve something or made a suggestion on the January 21st and then gave it to the commissioners, I assume that it goes to the commissioners after us, is that correct? And they'll need a meeting or two to review it? So it should be done by April? Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah?
So if we give it to them in January, so if they have 2 meetings, it'll be
February.
February, March, and needs to be in April.
April 1st.
Yeah.
They won't get it in.
But he's saying it's okay. If it's a week late or 2 weeks late, it's not the end of the
All
world.
right. So.
How long a
Kelly-
meeting?
We've done this before.
December's gonna be
We-
how long
We
a
had,
meeting?
one time we were so late, it was
December will be a long
unbelievable.
meeting.
I mean, it was a long
I don't
time.
know.
So-
I just think we could boil this down to a couple of easy issues, and we have no application.
Yeah, so
It's discretionary.
Are you gonna be here?
from
I will
from
be.
the commission
December 17th.
standpoint,
I leave the 18th.
Okay, good.
we're gonna have this workshop. Then we have to have a formal hearing,
Yes.
right? So we only have to have one formal hearing?
Yes.
Okay. So, we could have that formal hearing in if this comes back in December, we can finalize whatever it is and then have the formal hearing in January. They'll have it by February.
Yes.
Do they have 1 or 2 meetings? 2.
Ordinance,
So that gives them February and March and they're done, theoretically.
theoretically.
If they want to delay it, that's on them.
Why can't you say that? Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Well, they have to have 2 readings, but there's a substantial time in between first and second, because after first reading, we have to send it up to the state, regional planning council, DOT, and a bunch of different agencies.
They have to comment.
They have 30 days to comment. So,
Oh, okay.
I mean, if the commission sends it up after first reading before April 1st, I think the state's going to be thrilled.
Wonderful. We can make that.
To the extent that they get thrilled, of course.
They're not going to have to send us any more letters.
Thank you for all your help on this. Any comments, board member comments?
I have just 1 or 2 quick ones. So I saw that in our transportation element, that the town shall promote pedestrian and bicycle safety within the town. Within the state road Route A1A pathway, this may include public safety programs and information on the town's website. So I see we have some, we're cyclist friendly. We have some, watch for riders. I forgot what the specific sign is, which I think is great. But in particular, walking on Old A1A is challenging, particularly in the season, because people are walking on different sides of the street, and they should be walking against traffic. And if there was just some type of descriptive sign, it doesn't have to be written out, but maybe it just shows
Keep to
a
right.
road and, walk, run this way. It would be a lot safer, because a friend of mine's neighbor was struck and killed by a car in his neighborhood in Delray Beach, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. He was walking with traffic. Had he seen the car, he would have gotten out of the way and probably be with us today, but he didn't. And unfortunately, the person behind the wheel had a heart attack. So anyhow, we got a lot of people walking up and down that street. It's confusing for people. I think people get irritated when they think they're walking on the incorrect side of the street. And a lot of those pedestrians are coming over the bridge from Boynton Beach and walking on that route. So it'd just be good to, I think, for the city to think about getting some signage to decipher which would be the preferred way to walk down that street. as an example of what's being asked or suggested here in the transportation element.
And maybe something that could be considered is expanding the policy to say that the town would work with DOT, because of course those are all DOT rights of way. And I don't believe the town has the.
Not
ability-
Not on Old Ocean.
Not
Old
Old Ocean.
Ocean.
Old
yes.
Ocean.
Okay, Old Ocean. But you were also talking about the bridges and A1A as well, right?
I was just talking about the number of people coming onto Old Ocean
Okay,
today compared to the last, up until the last couple of years. Just a significant number of people that are coming over to walk on Old Ocean.
Ken?
gotcha.
Okay. Betty?
Good.
Neil? No? Okay, great. Just two comments for me. I have pulled together some information, or excuse me, asked some questions of Lynn and Kelly on our relationship with the park on the north end, right? And they provided to me some hard work was done in 1985 by Ken and thank you as well, back in the old days, to make sure that there's a balance between the residents on Harbor Island and the park, which has become out of balance recently. And so I appreciate your help in doing that. Make the commissioners aware of it as well. But it looks as if on a preliminary basis that the renovation work at the park did not incorporate the or adhere to what had been agreed to back in 1985. Right, so we're going to continue following up on that. Thank you very much, and seeing what can be done. The other thing is, Ken and I have provided pictures of seawalls.
Not together, independently.
Independently. We know we can't do anything together anymore. Independently of just this past Saturday, it was certainly a full moon and a high tide, and we can see here where you have water coming over the seawall, and there's no storm, there's no nothing here, guys. This is it, right? So where we have, and Ken was talking about earlier, they're dealing with Manalapan, certain issues as well, but where you have gaps in the height of the seawall is creating a situation that is exposing not only the neighbors in the neighborhood, but also the town right-of-ways, right? And so, Christy, we've been talking about that. And this is another one. These are, and this, by the way, property adjoins our bridge, and the relationship to the bridge, the seawall here, and the bridge itself is a concern to us as well. So every town is looking at this in the state, right? And so we've talked about it. Chrissy, you provide some stuff from Fort Lauderdale, what they're doing. So I'd like to think that we could put something on our agenda at some point to present something to the commissioners for their review.
The interesting thing about those pictures that you just saw was that what is missing? There isn't a structure there, is there?
Yes.
So it has nothing to do with whether or not that we have to redo a structure on the other side. That's affecting a right of way, and that's affecting the roadway, which is a different thing that we have to consider.
But it affects structure in certain areas of the town as well,
Right.
I think. I mean, the
Absolutely.
staff, you would know about that as well. You're I'm sure, hearing from the
So those
community.
houses own over.
On the other side, they're on the
Yeah,
right-hand
the other
side,
side, right.
right-hand
The
side of the
single
road.
loaded street.
Right.
Since you brought that up, one more point that I think we have to be aware of, and I guess this is more for the commission to hear, and Lynn, is what Manalapan is reopening the issue with the sand transfer station, sand transfer plant. Because there's a few residents up on north of the sand transfer plant that want to either shut down the sand transfer plant, they're not happy. So I would encourage you, I'll be more than happy to volunteer any discussions you would like to have about the history of what happened there and the lawsuit that we had for many, 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 many
Where's
years.
the sand transfer plant?
Sand transfer plant is north of the inlet.
On the north side, where
So what
the
happened
curvy
is-
piece,
Right.
that little building out there, that building takes sand and puts it on the other side of the inlet.
Pumps it from
Pumps it one side to the other
Manalapan side to the Ocean Ridge side, because when they put in that
And that's the
inlet,
pipe on the south side.
Yes.
that's the pipe
Oh,
on the south
I wondered what
side.
that was.
So what happened was many moons ago, when they built the inlet, what happened is the erosion in Ocean Ridge, that blocked the sand from coming from the north to the south. So what was happening is there was accretion on the properties in Manalapan. Their actually land has grown significantly.
Especially on the
Right.
south end of their town.
On the south end of their town, but north of where the sand transfer station is. So there was lawsuits and everything else, and I happened to be intimately involved in that stuff. Fresh when I got on the commission, I got the lucky assignment. This is going in the 90s. And it took a while, and we ultimately resolved it. I called it the stick in the sand, and we literally resolved it by a stick in the sand. And created the county was able to build a new sand transfer plant, and it's worked fine for many, many years. Albeit not perfect, but it has worked. But there's a push by some that want to take our sand, if you will.
And
So we gotta be
how do you know
mindful of
about
that.
this? Is this just?
It was in the Coastal
Well, it was
Star.
A, it was in the Coastal Star,
Okay.
but it was B, I'm lucky enough to.
Is the town aware of this?
people in Manalapan.
Lynn, are you aware of it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would be more than happy to discuss with whatever you need. They've already approached me, and
Is that really an issue just for Ocean Ridge, or does that carry all the way down to Gulfstream?
no, it's an Ocean Ridge issue.
Just
So
Ocean
what
Ridge. That
happened
sand
was-
wouldn't continue to
Right.
transfer down.
So, and then there was a giant we had the Army Corps was involved, the county. At the time, there was the Lake Worth Inlet District. That's been disbanded. And that's a whole nother history within a subset of that history. And it actually caused the demise of the Lake Worth Inlet District because they were controlling that at that time. The help of Mary McCarty when she was a commissioner, and Warren Newell, and we don't have to get into that just fiasco. But so there's a big history there as it relates to what the sand is. And there was a federal beach renourishment plan that also was incorporating it all. It was a giant, massive undertaking, quite frankly, years in the making and time that was involved in trying
When
to
was
resolve
the inlet
this.
built?
Oh, the inlet was built ages ago.
Go ahead.
Ages ago.
It's not
But-
an inlet, really.
It's not a legal end, but so the point being, and then the feds did a beach renourishment. There were groins put in. That's why you have 8 groins going down to stop and collect the sand so that it helps the Ocean Ridge renourishment. It goes all the way down to just south of Ocean Avenue. There the last groin is, I think. And if you go to the beach, right, you'll see it. And those groins every time you do something, it has an impact somewhere else, right? So when you say does it impact the southern area? Yeah. I mean, this is stuff that goes all the way from Palm Beach, right?
Yeah.
This is sand, it's the flow of sand. And so it's really a fascinating study if you want to look at how the flow of sand goes along there and the inlet, how that impacts the flow of sand. So anyway, we got to be cognizant of that. And it sounds like that Lynn is, and hopefully the commission is aware of that and don't sit lightly behind and
Back to
be active.
the comp plan. We're going to get this digital compilation in advance of
Oh,
the
yes, sir.
17th.
Yes.
For us to be reviewing that document to discuss.
Yes, prior to the meeting. Thank you, Irvin.
Good job. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
moved.
Vote with your feet.
But with your feet. That's what someone did 2 weeks ago.
Huh?
A lot of people
So-
did that 2 weeks ago.
And Manalapan